Hello, everybody. Much larger crowds than we were anticipating when we entered 20 minutes ago. Um, but just to lay out what we're going to talk about today, I think we're very curious to hear all how anybody's come into this conversation about generations. But the first time that I realized generations could be neatly separated by letters and connotations unto themselves was when I was visiting my grandparents one summer, and a Hero Cycles ad came on TV, and I was informed that I was Generation Y. And of course, since I was Generation Y, my generation would be asking why and be buying the Hero Y frame bicycles. And they hadn't got I think the ad makers hadn't quite got the memo about millennials, about calling it millennials before they started going wild with the Y puns. And then when I heard about millennials, it was in the context of the color millennial pink, a soft pink that would look great in an Instagram feed and on the back of an iPhone. And it launched 1,000 think pieces about how this was the generation that was breaking gendered colors and therefore norms. Bit of a stretch. But I think of these obviously market and algorithm um, narratives that have framed our understanding of the term millennial. And it's quite funny to me how ubiquitous it has become in my common parlance now today. And whether it's millennials, Gen Zs, boomers, it's just language that we come in and out of constantly. And regardless, and it seems to feel like so much of it comes from social media, where it can feel like every one of us millennials, regardless of where we come from, what we've done in our lives, are exactly the same, from apparently how we dance with our hands raised, or how we part our hair, which is on the side, and where we make important flight bookings, which is always on a laptop, never on a phone. And of course, how utterly try hard or chuggy we are. If all of this sounds like internet speak, it is. But of course, not all generational conversations are churned through the Insta algorithm and hilariously flattened into a single experience. So today, I'm hoping that there's an interesting conversation to be had with both Deepika and Aditya about generations and about how generational frames might be useful to us as we rewrite, move through the world. Um, these are two very different texts. One is fiction, one is nonfiction, and yet both grapple in their own ways with the stories we tell about ourselves and the world that we inhabit. Using a turn of phrase from Julian Barnes, our lives are part fiction, part fact, anyway. So, this is hopefully a conversation that brings all of that together. Aditya, whose book, Indian Millennials, Who Are They Really?, brings together essays, observations, statistics, anecdotes, to think about the contradictions, aspirations, cultural shifts happening and shaping Indian millennials today. And Deepika, whose book Good Arguments, which follows the character of Delphi as she moves through artistic spaces, friendships, questions of voice and belonging, and the subtle hierarchies of cultural life in a rapidly changing India. Between these two books, one analytical, one deeply interior, we have an opportunity to explore some shared questions about what it actually means to belong to a generation. Are generations defined by shared historical moments, technological shifts, political upheavals, cultural changes, or by shared cultural experiences, emotional experiences, and anxieties? How do expectations of the future shape how a generation sees itself? What role do storytelling, art, cultural life play in making sense of these experiences? And so, over the next hour, we'll be in conversation about these ideas at different points. Both Aditya and Deepika will hopefully read from their texts. Really encourage you to get a bit of a texture of the books themselves, because the conversation can maybe move around these two books. We're also trying to bring together two books that might not always be in conversation with one another. And after that, we'll open the floor to questions. So please have them ready, and we'll start. And I think the best place to start would be to establish your qualifications for being on this panel by definitively establishing that you are indeed a millennial. So tell me, when did you first realize you were a millennial or were told about it?
Uh, the first time I realized I was a millennial, I guess, would be when I was reading about, like, I was in school and I was reading about this little thing called uh, the economic liberalization. Uh, and yeah, it felt very irrelevant to me at the time because what did I know about economics and what did I know about liberalization? And immediately after that, this was
Deepika?
Um, I never thought that I'd be on a panel where millennials would be in the title. I think you framed this so well, Arundhati, and therefore, actually, everything you said has a bearing on the book. The kind of technology that's in the book, the entire soundtrack of the book is essentially a beer chugging uncle's soundtrack of Bangalore. There's emails, there's a cultural moment that we were talking about, the shared sort of. So I guess it is, in that sense, a book about a certain generation, but it's only because know that well.
Yeah.
Um, when did I first realize? I think I'm a little bit slow with terminology on the internet. It takes a while for it to stick, and as such, because this was never something I thought about, like about the book until this idea for the panel was floated. I wouldn't say that I have one definitive moment, but now that when you engage, like I work with a bunch of young people, creating like theater and doing and talking to, I don't know, friends, children, or like sort of mapping my own contours, like my own lived contours through the lives of younger people, especially those who are just having their political and social awakening. I realize something about this generational uh, thing that is beyond the internet parlance, and that has a little more groundedness in a kind of in the way that you walk through the world, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Very curious then, and maybe we can start with you, Deepika, because you already spoke to the fact that maybe generation was not an explicit frame in how you wrote good arguments. It's not sort of the entry point for your character, but your character is very much a millennial. She comes of age in different ways and is shaped by a lot of the events that I, as a young millennial woman, for example, the 2012 Delhi gang rape is a huge plot yeah in the book, and therefore just wondering from both of you, there's a direct engagement and a non-direct, or maybe not engagement with the generational frame. Curious if that generational frame at all is a useful, or how that, whether it impedes or it offers anything as a writer to you, or how you approach that question. And maybe we start with you, Deepika.
I mean, in hindsight, yes. If you look, you can actually place something that is circular um, in something square. Maybe this is possible. Um, I think I think all the markers in the book now, in hindsight, like I said, all the different layers of the book, including because the book is like moves at, I think, what a friend very correctly defined, the breakneck speed of life. When you're young, like everything comes at you, and the 2012, for example, the horrific gang rape is a part of how she finds out about, not finds out, but discovers her artistic voice, as in what women do we write about, how do they get written about? It's also critiqued as in how it was reported, why it was reported. We have it's a very complicated moment. Maybe to some degree even an expected moment, but it is a moment because I saw women around me change quite a lot. It's not, I wouldn't say it's an impediment, but I think if we're looking at the frame, yeah, there's also a city that gets preserved through the writing of a book, a mythological city which does not exist anymore. This is not a Bangalore that exists anymore. It is not an avocado on toast, 400 rupee matcha, boba tea, and I won't swear, but like co-working spaces. This is not that. This is not that ubiquitous, homogenous, not homo, like yeah, now homogenous city that you can experience in Berlin and Boston and I don't know Bali and like any number of alliteration. You know, like it is a time when there is a sense that you're on the cusp of something. Um, there's still a remnant of, but I don't know if that city actually existed. But I suppose in writing the book now, in this, if we look at this as a generational framework, perhaps there are things that do resonate with the idea of her being from a certain generation. And I think also the idea of struggling with power, and I'm sure we'll come to that at some point, or like coming to heads with um older generation. So I guess in her case it would be boomers, like her theater mentors, her theater teachers, or people in artistic and cultural spaces that feel like they are part of a secret society and you don't have the code to it. Like somebody asks you for the password and you're like, Y2K? I mean, I really don't know what it is. So I suppose I'm not sure if there's a real answer here, but I think it's a framework to look at the book through.
Right. So the question is about the significance of generational constructs, right?
Yeah.
So I think what we got to understand first of all about this thing called the generations is that when it is an arbitrary construct, like completely arbitrary construct, there is no official time period that defines a generation. It's just something that gets frozen in time. There is no official way of naming a generation. So people throw names at it, something sticks, that becomes the name of it. Like the Gen Y thing you mentioned, right? Also, it is no coincidence that your first moment of becoming aware about millennials is via an advertisement, and mine is via reading something about economic liberalization, right? Because generations are a demographic marker. In therefore, they are essentially a way for marketers to sell things, which is also why the country that talks the most about generations is America, because it markets the most amount of products. It wants you to buy the most amount of products, right? Which is also why if you see in the when a generation is just starting to being catered to, the portrayal is a very, it is of a certain kind, like it is misunderstood on, and it is put out that these folks are snowflakes, right? At the same time they are sold shiny stuff, and they are, you know, made to feel like they're still kids, but they now have disposable income. This is the exact same thing that is now being done to Gen Z. If you see Bollywood movies that portray Gen Z, you would think these are losers who are nothing but social media feeds on their phones, right? uh, if in reality you talk to a Gen Z person or you live with a Gen Z person, you would know that they have inherited a much more difficult world in which they are trying to somehow get a job, somehow get by, right? Uh, Whether it's a useful construct or not, I would say that it is an arbitrary construct that has been made real. So it is as important a construct as is a country or a company or marriage or whatever relationship that you can think of. Because every generation is defined by a cataclysmic event, right? Uh, like the uh, Nirbhaya rape case you mentioned. For another generation, it might be the imposition of emergency. For another, it might be the demolition of the Babri Masjid, right? Uh, and these are events that are cataclysmic enough to have either a shared trauma or a shared jubilation around them. So, if you go to the roots of how generations were defined, again, in our uh, empire, the center of our empire, right, in America, they are defined by World War II, by people who became hippies, by people who came of age when internet was just becoming a big thing. And all of these are like big events, right? Uh, we could go ahead and make generations of our own. There are people who have done that actually. So, for example, Snigdha Poonam has a book called The Dreamers. That's how she refers to the millennials. It doesn't really matter because eventually the names that stick are the ones who come from people who have the most amount of cultural hegemony, which are not brown people. So, I mean, we are there in numbers, but we obviously don't have any power. So yeah, that's I think the significance of it.
And just getting a bit more into the actual stories you're telling, right? Through if the conversation is about indeed the stories that we tell about ourselves, many conversations around generations do revolve around expectations. As you started saying that there is, you read about us being the first generation to be born into a neoliberal India, and what does that mean for us, etc. Um, so your book, Aditya, explores specifically how people construct stories about their generation, right? How do and therefore I'm kind of curious about how do expectations shape the way generations understand themselves, and what roles do narratives play in shaping who we are collectively? And there's that one particular essay that deals with it, and maybe you can speak a little more to that.
I mean, there is not a specific essay which deals with this, but it's a sort of a theme that keeps popping up in all the essays basically. So, for example, if you pick my essay called Millennials versus Apocalypse, which is about our environmental anxiety, uh, there is a lot to be anxious about, right? First of all. But then also, there is a sort of trend that makes you feel good about being anxious about the environment, uh, which I get is a slightly complex thing to think about. But think of it like this: that carbon footprint, for example, is a concept that was invented by a petroleum company called British Petroleum, right? Uh, these guys have had a major oil spill and they wanted to shift the focus from themselves and from other oil companies. So they partnered with Ogilvy and they created this campaign where each person could measure their carbon emission. So the guilt was passed on from corporations to individuals, right? And we are still harping on about it. But no matter how many paper straws you use, and no matter how much you buy containers for your shampoo and use, I don't know, jute bags or whatever, it doesn't really matter all that much in the end, except that you are not living like a pig, which is a good thing in itself. But it doesn't matter in the really big picture because 70% of the world's carbon emissions come from just 100 companies, right? Uh, which is a mind-boggling statistic if you really think about it. Like all sorts of awareness campaigns you can run, all the water that you can save by not showering and using a bucket instead, whatever Ogilvy and British Petroleum told us, isn't really enough to create a significant difference, right? We don't really have that kind of purchasing power, right? We are constantly being told that our buying behavior will have an impact on the world. It won't. Just like BDS has failed to, show Israel up. Similarly, us buying recycled material. By the way, recycled material itself, only 20% of it is actually recycled, which is another cynical stat. But yeah, uh, and all of these things together, they can creep up on you, and uh, they can really impact what you think of yourself and your place in the world, because somehow you're going to have to cope with it, right? So what has happened with millennials in particular is that it has pushed us more and more towards individualism. So in everything we want to carve out what we think of as a unique identity for us. Of course, it's not really unique. We have just picked it off Pinterest and Instagram, and then we have tried to be countercultural by going in the reverse direction, which is not Instagram and not Pinterest. But even that has been replicated so many times because you went phonetically in the opposite direction, right? Other people had the same idea. uh, it helps us feel individual, simplistic and it gives us some sort of importance in our own heads. Overall, I think it helps us create stories in which we can, continue to go on and on with our lives. Because, and I mean, I'm saying it as if it's really our fault, but most of it is not, because we are kind of staring at Lovecraftian horrors, right, on a daily basis. Uh, so it's a cat and a pigeon situation. The pigeon is looking at a cat. Uh, there is no fight or flight to do, so it closes its eyes, and that's how it goes to the next day, just waiting for the cat to pounce and gobble it up. Next question I'll answer in a more upbeat manner.
Um, yeah, I. um, uh, I think there is these stories that we tell of ourselves. I really resonate with that idea of like so much of what we've tried to craft for ourselves has been born out of this idea of having borrowed these neoliberal anxieties, but also continuing to live in collectivist communities sometimes, and that constant tension and kashmakash of how do you find yourself in the middle of all of that, because finding yourself is the ultimate project in that sense. And therefore, I think coming to Deepika, when you were writing Delphi, how much were you thinking about broader social movements, what was happening at the time, for broader social movements versus her own life, her own interior life, who she wanted to be? So much of it is an exploration of her coming into herself in that sense, as an individual character. So, guess what I'm also asking is, uh, to little bit put this generational frame aside for a second and ask, for writers, there's this tension of wanting to write something that's timeless, that cuts across, that you pick up one day and it still holds up, versus writing about a period of time, witnessing it, experiencing it, being a documenter of it. Where do you find uh, Delphi sits?
Definitely in the second space, because I really, the timeless thing really does not keep me up at night. In fact, she's writing a play in the book, and a lot of the book reads as a play sometimes. There's lots of genres of writing itself. Sometimes it's a diary entry, sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's her own notes after rehearsal. And one of her theater sort of there's a playwright who's assigned to her, who's her mentor, and he says, good plays stand the test of time. Something I've heard in my like years of like being a young, when I started out, and I wanted to write that timeless thing. And often a male figure, an older male figure, very serious looking one, would be like, that's not what you've written, it's not a good play. Good plays stand the test of time. And she compares that to like a, like, how do you write that? Do you carve it on a stone, on a rock, and let it weather? I think I wanted to, uh, as first books go or as debut novels go, uh, you want to write the thing you write, and then hopefully, or actually not hopefully, you don't get seduced by market forces to write the next best, like whatever. Right now you write the thing that you want to write, that's been percolating for a while. And because it does deal with this tension of the inside and the outside, um, and it is set in a very specific time, and in a city. I suppose it could be any city, but it is Bangalore, and it's a city that I know well, or I think I know well. um, there is a there's a desire to capture or to write a person who's also dealing with the inside and outside of cultural shaping, or shaping culture. Somebody who does not come from cultural capital, who does not understand the design of what is inherently quite a gate kept world, um, but is also, the thing that she shares with all her companions is that illogical need uh, to be an artist of some sort. And it is truly an illogical need. I can tell you that from experience. uh, it's a thing of like, this is this is what I want to do, but I think there's an opening in the first chapter. There's an image that for me feels like it gives you a sense of who she is, which is that after a rehearsal, after a evening of drinks at a local like bar that they all frequent, and hearing some very intense conversations, she's dragged away to somebody's house, um, in a tucked away part of town that could look like central London at night, or I don't know, fancy part of Delhi. And she enters his house, and it's a bit like there's marble floors, there's staff with actual uniforms, there's a hand carved swing that looks like it's rescued from the palace, from a palace. There's an older gentleman um, sifting through records and smoking a big spliff, and just life feels easy and cool and moody and spacious. And this is nothing close to what she's encountered coming from a family or a single mother who raised her, who works in a bank. And I think we talked about this idea of the first, right? The first, in some sense, this illogical thing that I've done, which is to, nobody in my family would have conceived that you move on an artist visa to a whole other country and live and work doing almost exactly what you could have done here, but you chose something else, and you chose the promise of cultural funding, which by the way is going to soon be diverted towards weapons and military conscription. um, it's a whole other panel perhaps. But she's also, I suppose, in that sense, a first type of dreamer, um, who is saying, I I want a life in which I'm able to experience something extraordinary. And now the value of this term extraordinary can be debated, and whether her mother in a bank is doing an extraordinary thing or whether she isn't. Um, so, and because it's written in a certain time, and there is this question of how how do I stop performing plays in which I'm playing John and Jen and Mary? It's like a borrowed text. How can I write about myself? And um, she writes a play called Women in Bangalore at some point in the book. And the head of the theater, it's a new theater that's open in the city, is a bit like, I mean, it's not lofty enough. It doesn't feel, cannot be timeless. Surely a play called Women in Bangalore is not a timeless piece of writing. It sounds pretty much like, uh, I don't know, like something that would come out in a neighborhood newspaper or something. But the minute the Nirbhaya thing happens, they're like, oh, we're actually interested in producing it. And that's one of the many, many types of things that happen in the play, which shows you, not shows you, but is a sort of document of how culture moves and who gets to decide what stories we tell and how we tell them, etc. Quite a quite a roundabout way to answer perhaps what you said, but
Yeah.
in that sense, not I wasn't TLDR, TDLR, TLDR, TLDR, was not interested in creating a timeless thing,
Mm.
but was definitely interested in creating a thing that contained a multitude of worlds in its like in its literary and whatever chronological truth.
Mm. That's a great TLDR.
Could have started with that.
um, Aditya, I wonder, because your form as essays allows you to take what might be individual stories like Delphi's and try to cobble together some sort of a pattern and some sort of uh, so in whatever you have studied, then what are some core contradictions, some core aspirations that you find are are starting to get peppered, that start to maybe little bit interact with what Deepika is talking about?
Yeah, I mean they do, but of course, more than the larger than life stuff, I'm more interested always in the the granular stuff. So, for example, there is this guy I talked to in Haridwar, right? Who met a girl in October, had a wedding in January, and got divorced in April, right? And this was an arranged marriage. Uh, Obviously, I mean, nobody would be foolish enough to not to do this in a non-arranged marriage setup. That's another story. So yeah, and now the contradiction here is that he was a fellow millennial. So divorce is an acceptable thing for him, right? Which was not the case for his family at all. They were very insistent on him, like plodding along. And if you only heard this much of the story, you would probably think that like an okay guy, right? Or an okay girl, because they did what they had to do. But then also his reasons for taking the divorce were very, for lack of a better word, icky. So he met this girl and they didn't meet enough. So that when he actually was married to her, he realized that he was not at all attracted to her, right? Which led to this sort of protracted ugliness between them, and eventually it ended in that situation, like in a divorce. And when I talked to him, I realized he before his wedding he had not dated another girl. Like he had never been alone with a woman till was married, like till the day he was married with this. Uh, and all that he knew about women came from external sources, from a lot of off-color sources as well. And that's sort of a contradiction if you see, because this guy has there is no problem of access to information. There is also no real family pressure because he is able to get divorced when he really wants to do that. But still, he's entrenched in the same system. Like the generational label has not been enough to pull it out of that, right? Uh, and I mean, there is a lot of stuff that I'm not like that. I'm leaving out of this story. You'll have to read the book for that. Which actually my editor wanted me to take out. So there is a reason I'm not like spelling it all out. But there are a bunch of contradictions like that. So I've met people in Mathura. Like I met a man in Mathura who has never given a competitive exam and yet hates reservations, right? Because he hates them on principle, right? Everyone tells him ki this is what's responsible for keeping you behind in life, and he has told himself the same story. And it was an interesting conversation with him because he is sitting with his hand on a cow and talking to me, and uh, he's telling me that he was not able to do a lot of stuff in his life because he was kept out of educational institutes and he didn't have enough money to go to a private institute and all of that. And I'm sitting and thinking he must have given a lot of exams. He must have been stopped at some point, and that's what's leading to this tragic story. And then I asked him which exam he sat for, and it turned out he failed his 12th board exams, and he never went into that entire road. He never went down that road. So I would say ours is very much a generation of contradictions. And yes, some of them are more upscale than the others. Like some contradictions are more upscale. They get talked about more. For example, there is n number of news articles now about how adolescents are being affected by millennial uh, toxic male influencers like Andrew Tate and uh, others of his others of his ilk. Yet no one seems very interested in talking about the fact that 97% of marriages among millennials in India were arranged marriages, right? Which is a statistic that alone should uh, force you to think a lot about how far we have really gone from the previous generation. Because arranged marriages do not come alone; they come with a lot of baggage, which has to do with caste, with class, with how much you have been able to, gain that upward mobility that is so characteristic of the millennial dream, uh, or even how the people who, how the people who even get out of that hierarchy, how much they are permitted to cross these boundaries, right? That millennials keep telling themselves are not relevant.
Mm.
So I did this little survey when I when I was writing the essay about relationships, where I asked my friends and people I knew from college if they can get married to a person, to a Dalit person or a Muslim person,
Mm.
and a fair number of them have had uh, relationships and love marriages, but they point blank refuse. That is not something they would be allowed. So millennial liberalism, insofar as it is visible on Instagram, has a very narrow Lakshman Rekha, right? Uh, and it's fun and curious, but I am a little bit
That is truly up for debate. But no, that's that's fascinating because these are contradictions that some of them are really in vogue to talk about. As you were saying, it's really fun, and it's really something that that is, yeah, that we engage with constantly. But there's also parts of these contradictions that are just uncomfortable to sit with, and are extremely difficult to speak about. But ultimately, all the things that you were sharing, Aditya, and what you were saying earlier as well, Deepika, seem to start to cobble together some sort of a, you know, a generation that's shaped by what's happening in India, but a generation that's also shaping what's happening. It, that's also starting to shape. And so, therefore, it's so interesting, Deepika, to kind of come into maybe what does Delphi's story tell us about a rapidly changing India? You know, what does it tell us about belonging, self-expression, identity in a rapidly changing India? Yeah.
I think the phrase rapidly changing India is just sounds snazzy, but in the book there isn't a rapidly changing India, and there isn't also a rapidly changing city, but there is a changing city, and there is there are rapidly changing women, uh, because like right after the December of 2012 when this thing happens, women are out on the street, and she's thinking this is perhaps in her lifetime the first time that she's like encountering the, you know, the goosebumps that you get when you hear of like many people out on the street. Perhaps we felt this in 2019 when the anti-CA thing was happening, or haven't experienced much after that. But yeah, I don't know what it can tell you in a neat kind of way, because I think because when you deal with one character's sort of dilemma and interiority, um, to make like universal assumptions feels like it can't be my job. But if I had to, I think there's at least in Delphi's case, there's the question of um, starting to recognize um, how insidious some spaces can be, even though those are the spaces she sees herself continuing to be part of. And I think we work with that contradiction a lot, right? You know that sometimes institutions are just impossible, and you will always have this friction with them, but they also, I suppose, they enable certain types of cultural conversations, or they allow things to happen. They also have money. um, they they create, and we're talking in an institution. um, so it is, in fact, we are playing out that thing, right? We're talking about these things in an institution. And so I think there's that recognition that like you will always be, the sadness of a kind of adulthood is recognizing that you will always be in a place of friction, or like you will have to be, you are the kind of threshold, um in that sense, and you will always be one foot in, one foot somewhere else. I think Advaita said something about one foot the past and one foot in the future. and she opens a theater company with her boyfriend, or what actually is a situationship, but that term has not been coined back then. For those who don't know what a situationship is, it's, how would you define it? Like a relationship that does not call itself one, and that is a bit like dodgy in terms of yeah, it's a dodgy situation. It's a situation. Some one of them thinks they're in a relationship and the other person does not, or something like this. But when she opens this theater company, she does not in the beginning she's told that, hey, we'll start this company together, you and me, we can make like amazing things happen because we're young, we're like in this cultural zeitgeist. He's also rented according to the zeitgeist, he's like in the cultural heart of the city, blah blah blah. And eventually he brings his like startup bro type of guy, who actually puts in the money, because actually Delphi cannot put in the money. Her mother Asha will absolutely not accept this. This is a ridiculous idea that her bank salary should go towards such an insane proposition. And the startup bro has the vibe of, you're going to see like 10 years, even a safety pin can be delivered to you. What does live performance mean in this economy, etc., etc. Um, so she starts this thing, and but she's not a real partner, but she's sort of a, she's bringing the stories, she's doing a lot of the work. And towards the end of the book, it's not a spoiler, so I will say it, but do read it to to arrive at the how did this happen, is that he tells her, and I think for me this gave me like, it was a really important moment in the book for me. He meets her at a bar that's going to be closed, the same bar that they used to drink at. It's going to be temporarily closed, and then it's going to be replaced by a bar with like exposed bricks and wrought iron, and they serve your drinks and your food in that kind of bedpan looking aluminium shallow dish,
And mason jars.
and mason jars.
Yeah.
So it's not well, maybe not really. I think many bars have this aesthetic. I refuse to refuse to slam one. But he tells her that, like, look, let's not do this. Let's not be in a relationship anymore. We're really doing well as the black sheep enlisters, which is what their theater company is called. We're on the cusp of something, and this like plane is about to take off. And he actually means it. Like, he really means that we're in this moment. And I've seen like people who are in relationships, like they're surrounded by people who are like well known, and these kind of like hefty cultural figures who are in relationships, and it is like bad. It's just bad news, because it's all those terms. It's toxic. It's kind of it brings there's no boundaries. It's all of the things that defines perhaps loosely and ironically another generation. And he says, let's not do that. Let's commit to this thing that we're about to uh, do together. And there's a kind of sadness, but a kind of recognition of, yeah, maybe this is not so it's not so. What was the question? What was the
question is about rapidly or not so rapidly
yeah,
changing India.
but I think it's about rapidly changing people.
Yeah.
And rapidly, and that's, I suppose, as good as a rapidly changing country or a cultural scene, because like these are the small imperceptible shifts that actually define you coming into like that are transformations, right? And it's a lot of like big things are part of these little transformations. For example, um, there was no word, or there was no phrase for a kind of abuse in cultural spaces or any space if it wasn't kind of sexual in nature. If it was just emotional and mental, there was no phrase for it. You just went into a room and you were like, gosh, I feel icky here. Like, it's not good. The vibes are off. Like, people are not treating me well. And in the subsequent years, if the book continued, there would be such a thing as a Me Too
Me too.
movement, or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
just broad brush strokes, which you will neatly fill in to make to make the connection.
Nice. No, I was going to say that I was about to move on to form and the forms in which you've both written, but wondering if you both want to do some reading.
Actually, yeah, before that, I have
Yeah.
just a slide
Yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah,
rapidly changing. Just because my view is slightly different. Uh, so when you talk about millennials, right? When we talk about millennials and their changing reality or the world changing around them, people who recognize themselves as millennials already have it pretty good. Uh, I mean it in the sense that people who don't have it good are not aware of a term called millennials, right? People who are not in the same social class as us. And Arundhati Roy has this image that she wrote about, and it has stayed in my head. Uh, is that when we talk about rapidly changing India, there are actually, you can imagine it as two different buses, right? And people are getting in into these buses, and one bus is moving towards, like, I don't know, Bangalore, and the another is moving towards the hinterlands, right? And the second bus, the one that's moving toward the hinterlands, it's packed to the brim. There are people sitting on the on the roof as well. So when we talk about rapidly changing words, I'm sure it's getting a little worse for everyone over time. But the way we feel, that is very different. So just to illustrate this with an example, I was house hunting over the weekend, right? And this flat we really liked, and we were okay with the rent. We kind of like made our mind. Talk to the owner. Everything was done, right? We just had to sign the thing on Sunday, and then we go in to talk to the owner. He actually meet us, and he asked us, "Ki, are you Sanatani?" Right? Uh, and we are like, we are not, right? And he's like, "Yeah, I have a temple in my house. I can't give it to non-Sanatani people." And we are like, we don't want a Sanatani house, so it's not really a question of anything else at this point. But while we were bitching about this back after coming back home, uh, we were kind of also thinking about that there are people whose houses are getting demolished, right? Like that's the rapidly changing world for them. Because the conversation that we were having was ki the world has changed so much in the last years that even in Bangalore you can get asked something, you can get asked something like this. And for those of us who are coming from small North Indian towns, Bangalore, even though we say a lot of bad things about it, there is traffic, it has changed so much, there is less greenery. It has been sort of a, how do I put it, like a relatively much more liberal refuge. So we are talking about the world has changed so much. You can get asked such a thing in Bangalore, whether you are Sanatani or not. And then we are like, actually, no. The world has changed so much, it has evolved so much that your house can get bulldozed just on someone's whim, right? Uh, so yeah, I just wanted to add that perspective about how do we measure rapid changes in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this, sorry, just to add to
Yeah.
that, and I think maybe Arundhati Roy is a theme. uh, this idea of, like, when people meet and say, "Oh, you know that one." Yeah, 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 totally, totally. I met that one also. Such a small world. It really is saying that English and access is such a small world, because why is it that you run into the same people over and over again? And if these people end up shaping culture, um, what does that actually mean? And then if we're talking about a country that's a larger landscape, because everyone inhabits a different country and a different city, even if you live in the same one. But even in terms of, like, cultural conversation, like what art is good or whatever, who is defining that? I've been on a number of artist residencies in the last, I would say, 7 to 8 years. And every time a new cohort is announced in another part of Europe, even like oftentimes India, I will recognize at least one or two names. I would have encountered somebody, and maybe somebody saying that about me as well. That, oh yeah, this person, they were with me at a solitude in 2023. And that really tells you something. And that for somebody, the bus is really going towards Bastar, and for somebody else, it's going towards Berlin. But like the the capacity of the bus and yeah the optimism in the bus is very, very different, I suppose.
Have succeeded in like bringing Deepika's level, like spirits
Yeah,
down
you
to the
you've
floor.
established a baseline cynicism. No, I think it's very interesting that you're both saying this, and this whole panel is about the stories that we tell of ourselves and of our generation, because I think one of the absolute great travesties of the last 10 years especially is that somebody else is constantly telling our stories. There are narratives constantly being constructed as to what we want, who we are, we what is the world we are constructing, and that is one of the great travesties. And to constant and to be able to wrest control of the narrative again, to be able to tell stories that are not already told, or stories that beg to know, that are consciously being suppressed from being um the line of what is radical has changed. So that is the thing that has changed most rapidly in the last 10 years. So yeah, so I wanted to give you both an opportunity to read if you wanted to.
Sure.
No, you're good.
No, I'll do that.
You okay?
So it depends actually. So and also so how many people here consider themselves spiritual? Is okay, a fair number. Yeah, then I'll do the reading.
Okay.
Because,
Oh, this is from that essay. Okay,
no,
go
yeah,
for it.
it will have a calming effect. I think after everything I've said. Yeah, the essay is called "Spiritual, Not Religious." Actually, so despite the glamorous and peppy sentiments often associated with the world's largest generation, multiple studies show that millennials are objectively worse off than previous generations on multiple counts, and many in India admit to being anxious about the future. We are so exhausted that we have no time to meet people, and as a result, we are lonely. We are so lonely that it exhausts us. We marry late or not at all. We cannot afford houses or cars or children. We are anxious about climate change. We have already gone through one recession, maybe in the middle of another one. Facts are no longer sacrosanct. The news cannot be trusted. Previously unknown viruses can bring the world to a standstill, hold us hostage within our homes for the better part of 2 years. And the geopolitical horrors of the last century seem intent on staging a comeback. Going back, going by the Norris and Inglehart school of thought, we should be ripe for religion's appeal right about now. We need something, a metaphysical glue, to keep us from falling apart in a world that demands everything from us and yields next to nothing in return. Yet, religion doesn't quite fit the bill for those of us privileged enough to be entrenched in consumerism. In India, that implies an upper middle class educated metropolitan existence, constantly on the lookout for upgrades and improvements. Religion requires service from us, but we want a service for ourselves. We want it to come to us via the comfort of our screens, preferably, rather than making us go to it at, say, a designated place of worship. We don't want to belong to a community. We want something that can help us craft a unique identity. Q, enter spirituality. Despite its penchant for staying free of definitions, over the years, various people have made attempts to define spirituality. And my favorite one by far is by Matthew Headstrom, professor of US religious history at the University of Virginia. Spirituality, the good professor says, is what consumer capitalism does to religion. Are you guys done already, or do you want me to go on for a little bit? Okay, I'll just. Okay, fine. You asked for it. Spirituality, the good professor says, is what consumer capitalism does to religion. This doing, I believe, is the transformation of an institution into a product. Products, unlike institutions, can easily be updated, customized, or even personalized. They don't come with a set of inviolable rules because we don't belong to our products, we own them, and different varieties of a product are encouraged to compete in a free market. Just as we choose different flavors of potato chips or ice cream, we can choose different flavors of spirituality and switch to a new one when we get bored with same old, same old. A spiritual person can subscribe to ISKCON, Isha, Art of Living Foundation, Sufi mysticism, transcendental meditation, and active positivity all at the same time, or keep moving between each of them. But a religious person will find it difficult to be Hindu and Muslim at the same time. The availability of choice is also apparent in the sense that spirituality, unlike religion, has no ideological barriers. For those with center of left inclinations, there is a whole lot of spirituality that discards outdated orthodox beliefs. Manifestation, for instance, which refers to the practice of achieving your goals by visualizing them day in and day out, does not prefer straight people over homosexuals or Rajputs over the Dalits. By placing your faith in manifestation, you can get back a sense of control over the world's random chaotic machinations, thus getting the benefit of religion's main feature without needing to compromise on your liberal worldview. If you lean right of center, no problem. There are flavors perfect for you as well. Upper caste millennials who want to hold on to their pride by birthright but find it incompatible with their modern lifestyles can find solace in English speaking, bike riding, sunglasses sporting gurus. Their religion's bloody history, its baroque trappings are all cleaned up and legitimized by the new vocabulary of spirituality. Their resentment against caste based reservations is justified when caste is explained as a merit based system that was benevolent to one and all in the glorious past and only got corrupted by external influences. Burning crackers on Diwali was, following similar narratives, a way of killing mosquitoes and other disease laden insects that got active during that particular time of the year. Mahashivratri celebrations are pitched as a secular festival meant to reap the benefits of a rare astronomical phenomena. So, yeah, that's it. I hope that had a calming effect.
Can you bear with me for the next 5 minutes? Okay. Wildly different, what I'm about to read. Um, this is, yeah, this is.
The word falls apart.
Yeah, yeah. Also, this is definitely a metaphor. Um, while we were talking about how the 2012 incident kind of shapes Delphi's imagination of writing, um, her single mother and her have also encountered a phantom kind of presence of a man outside their house. So while this like thing is happening, there's also a man lurking outside their house. They've spotted him once or twice. And after being quite frustrated, Asha, her mom, says, let's just go to church and pray because I don't know what else to do. And it's December, it's Christmas, it's like her favorite time of the year. And her boyfriend V, like the letter V, it stands for Vikrant, um, there's a wedding that they're invited to, and she doesn't go for the wedding because she wants to go with her mother and pray. So it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I liked St. Patrick's Church. It was on the junction between Brigade Road and Residency Road, and it shared its wall with Catholic Club. It had a spacious compound where people could park their cars and walk to God. Through the second half of December until the first week of January, this whole part of town was dressed in lights. They were strung through the shop tops of Brigade Road, best experienced on foot, and we had said it felt like Times Square or Oxford Street, having been to neither. John, in his former days of having a conscience, would have retaliated with, why does everything have to be like something in Europe? Sue rightly named it Church Street Deck Out. At St. Patrick's during this time, all the masses were full. Neither Asha nor I would have wanted to stand among a crowd any other time. On Christmas, this Christmas, we made an exception. We wanted to pray, we wanted to make some reasonable demands. At some point, Asha found a place to sit. I slunk out and quietly walked over to Catholic Club. The watchman wouldn't let me in at first. Wedding, I said, I'm a guest. I just want to wish the couple. No, no, madam, he said. What he didn't say was, is this how you dress for a wedding? I'd felt this feeling before, this useless lack of membership feeling. On Christmas, on Steve's wedding day, it was worse. Honestly, if I had the money, one of the first things I would do would be to become a member in all these clubs: City, Catholic, Savoy. And I would go around signing random people in, especially young women looking to carry out a harmless voyeuristic exercise. As I turned to leave, having teared up and shrunk considerably, he said, "Go, madam. What could be the worst outcome of letting this ragged and anxious looking girl into Catholic club on Christmas? Being fired, probably." Later, I realized I could have shown him the invite on email from Steve and Michaela. The club was full. This was Catholic club on Christmas Eve. They had their own bash. Steve and Michaela had somehow managed to squeeze a small wedding party into the most anticipated night in this institution. Steve's laughter was unmissable. He was in a white tuxedo with a black tie, his bald head shinier than usual, his goatee was freshly done, and his friends had similar looks. I took heart in Bangalore's goatee club. I hoped it never ran out of fashion. Michaela, tattooed, recently muscular, was on the balcony section of the building on the right, surrounded by her girlfriends, also laughing. You know, the impending drudgery of marriage and all that. Her father, presumably, came over with 2 drinks and handed her one. He was definitely her dad. They cheersed and he stood next to her, his arm around her, squeezing her frequently, a bliss I'd seen parents only reserve for societally sanctioned events of note: weddings and the birth of their grandchildren. How he held her made me jealous. I wanted a father, then melancholic. I'd never have one. Then sort of warm. At least someone did. My eyes went over to V in a suit, grey blue, well fitting. V owned a suit? He held a tall glass of beer and spoke to an older couple. In another world, those could be my parents and him my fiancé. I imagined it for a second. It felt distant, fake. Did V feel my absence? Did he understand my fear? Did he know that I was with my mother praying for a man to stop stalking us? V was my boyfriend, then a friend, an acquaintance, a stranger, an actor with good costume, and amiable co actors. A waiter offered me a glass of wine. "Merry Christmas, ma'am." "Thanks, sir." I took it. The band playing for the Christmas party played My Sharona and replaced Sharona with Michaela. Michaela and Steve raised their glasses from wherever they were. The crowd went, "Woohoo!" V2, heads bobbed. Life was good. I reveled in pure spectatorship, watching allowed contact with yourself that having to participate did not. I kept thinking, things happened, terrible things happened. People lost limbs, lives, dignity, faith at the back of buses or inside their homes or on the street or at work or where they were turned inside out with iron rods or they drowned in gutters. And still time moved on ruthlessly. People got married and came belligerently to round tables and got drunk at weddings and walked out into the world knowing their lives were intact for this second or forever, including me. And sometimes you could stand at the threshold with both these compositions and choreographies playing out side by side, knowing there were countless other choreographies, including a man outside your house looking threateningly in while you look longingly or pensively into someone else's home or club or life. And that was so much a part of living, people looking into someone else's life, fear and beauty abundant depending on where you stood and where your life had let you see so far. And beauty was real and fear was real. You needed to revere and believe in both. Maybe that could lift you, lift us. It had to, because 200 feet away, a woman prayed and prayed to be lifted out of fear and not to be placed in beauty, just in okayness. Here, standing on this threshold between beauty and fear, I was present to life's hand touching my chest. I wanted to touch it back. I just hadn't figured out how.
Hi, I'm Suresh. In case you're wondering, I'm not a millennial. Okay. Yeah. I found this initially, I thought I'd lost my way and come in here, but I loved this entire discussion. I just want you guys to know you're, you're also fantastic writers. Uh, Loved it, enjoyed it. Uh, Not much more educated. I have 2 daughters, one of whom is a millennial and calls herself a millennial. That's how I know what it means. And uh, just, I was always wondering what is a description of a millennial? And I think the closest description I came to was what Gautam gave about the professor's defining it. I think a lot of sense. It's being marketed. I looked it up on Google, and it looks like some playwrights came up with that expression first, but your definition fits best, and it's a marketing ploy and nothing more. And uh, I'm a retired doctor, and my group, when we talk without any millennials around, it is not very complimentary to what the millennial generation coming in. And we are scared that in our old age, we are going to get taken care of by them. But I have over the years changed my opinion about this. I think they are far more idealistic and caring. They are more concerned about the environment, like you mentioned, and they are generally they are far less rooted in materialism and more living at for the moment, because they realize that the generations before have given them a bad pack of cards. And I just want to say thank you for having this program.
Thank you.
I have two children who are millennials and three nieces who are also millennials. And I think they are wonderful children and they are so different. One son is in the corporate, completely different, and they grew up when the mosque in Srinagar, I was in the Indian Air Force as a pilot, was being demolished and there were hardly any schooling. And they grew up, the school was right there in the campus, in the Air Force campus. And one of them went, the younger one went to IIT. The elder one is in corporate. He pays more tax than I ever earned in my life. The younger one went to Germany after his IIT Delhi. And we knew that this generation is different, especially my wife, when she asked him, "Where are you going to stay?" He said, "You know that girl I met, she's made some arrangements for." "Where is that?" She said, "It's her house." She said, "Her house. So she's got two rooms, right?" He said, "No, she's got one room." She, she swallowed that. So he said, "What's the room like?" And he's spiritual. And so was that girl, older than him. He said, "There are two meditation mats, but one bed." And that was it for my wife. And I told her, "Look, at least he's got someone there in a foreign country to look after him. So let him go." Because he said, she's saying that you are 22 and you still have to ask your parents. Okay. So we were from a generation where we wrote letters and waited for 10 days for a reply. If we wanted to speak on the phone, we used to come to this telegraph office down the corner and book our trunk call and wait for an hour or so and then speak. But now they are both so loving and they both get along so well. The younger one, after all those studies, he's just joined the Art of Living 18 years ago, and he's the secretary to Sri Ravi Shankar and doing a marvelous job. The other guy is globe-trotting all continents, and they still all get along better, get along very well, and the family is very happy with them. My nieces are also all over the place, and they book, uh, movies for me whenever there's movie tickets and all that. So I think the millennials, you kids, are fantastic, and whatever little negativity you think is there is all imaginary.
Sir, please sign a book for me with your contact so that if I ever get sued, I know who to contact because your son has the right contacts.
How did you come with the title names? Because they're very funny. The book, the chapter, essay names.
Oh yeah. So Uh,
It's very millennial with us.
yeah, actually, so I wanted the book to be called Millennials versus the Apocalypse. Uh, my publisher preferred this because obviously more approachable, and it has given good ROI, so as to say. But the essay titles were completely me, and basically, it's what any copywriter does, right? You take out the kernel of what you are trying to put in that essay. Some are just people said a thing, and I just put it as a title. Ki, spiritual, not religious, is actually a phrase that I heard so many times I had to make it a title. Uh, and then there is Eat Your Fears is of course a cultural reference. The Avara Gardi of Millennial Hearts is that title because any romantic relationship in my house was referred to as Avara Gardi. कि ये तो बहुत आवारा है uh, everyone killed Sushant Singh Rajput came from no one killed Jessica. Ruskin Bond young boy old author is something that he told me during the conversation. uh, at 30 am I still a liberal was a question that I had to ask myself and didn't get a very definitive answer to because liberals have fucked themselves over so much. uh, about the Kashmir files is basically I wanted to write about a repugnant thing and I didn't want to spend much time thinking about the titles. So I put the name there as it is. So yeah.
My question to Deepika. Since the book is based 2012, so if you were to set a book, the same setup in Bangalore, considering how Bangalore has changed from 2012, what would you that the whole premise of this is like the life changing aspect through the blurb that I got to know is the gang rape that happened. But when if you have to set up something at this time from Bangalore, what would be the life changing event for the protagonist? What would it
Oh my God, aren't there so many? I feel like it would be, I don't know, it would be so difficult to write.
World War Three.
I feel it's a minor event for me personally. Doesn't really, I'm not really clocking it until I can't cook. No, I think, I don't know if it's Bangalore specific, but something that's been like on my mind because I was between two countries and seeing the uh like Gaza basically I think feels like I don't know what these podcasters are saying about it being you've heard right there's a whole bunch of people
It's
saying
woke to say.
it's woke to talk about Gaza. But I think for me it feels like a very interesting place to talk about a whole number of things without reducing it this horrific thing to being an interesting thing. That's not what I mean. I just feel like between two countries this was something that that felt like I could there's so much to unpack here. There's Germany's relationship with this, there's also our own relationship, like this idea of spectatorship. What do you do? uh, an idea of helplessness. I think helplessness is a good event. I feel this has been defining the last 5 years generation.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think I agree. Like I really agree with Deepika about. I think this is the one event that has revealed our revealed the millennial impotence in all its vapidness. Right? The information age means nothing. You can wake up every day to a picture of kids dying. You can ruin your day about it. You can't do shit about it. Uh, if at this point it's not clear to anyone, they are kidding themselves. Uh, and it has also so it has kind of also revealed na, ki it doesn't matter how many people know about a bad thing happening. It doesn't matter. It can happen completely in the open. It can be telecast live. It will still not change a thing because even though we were led up to believe as a generation that we have all this power because of our ability to express ourselves, eventually we are seeing that the ability to express ourselves means nothing unless it's a vote. Uh, and even that vote really doesn't matter unless you live in the USA or Israel. Uh, so yeah, I think this is going to be our cataclysmic event. Even though I hate the fact that this is going to be our cataclysmic event, because there are
Several,
so
yes.
many things happening closer home that we may actually have an electoral impact upon, which is all getting sidelined because of this. And I mean, you can't really be that sort of a like a butcher sitting there with the scales and measuring human blood on one side with human blood on the other side, and then choosing what you write about, talk about. Uh,
Hi, I'm Parag. Uh, the question is for both of you. I mean, I just wanted to get your perspective, assuming that I haven't read your books yet, but you have done your travels and research. In this information age where, the consumption of whatever is available, whether you are in a rural location or urban location, is possibly standardized. Have you found any difference, or in your experience, is there a English millennial and a vernacular millennial? Is there something like that?
there is so a good case study for this is TikTok versus Instagram in India. So if you see TikTok, it was massively popular, but the people on it were not people who looked like the people in this room right now. They did not hear, they did not listen to the same songs, they did not dance the same way. The jokes they found funny would not be funny to us. The things that they were passionate about would be jokes to us, right? That entire thing was going on, and their clips were being picked out and put on Instagram as cringe content, as so-called cringe content. And that reveals the divide that you are talking about, right? The English millennial and the, let's call it the vernacular millennial, to be absolutely to be absolute assholes. Uh, but that it exists. It doesn't depend on us choosing or not choosing it. It definitely is there. My book actually opens with this anecdote. I was telling these guys earlier also, where I asked a man in Mathura if he knows what millennials are, and he thought I was talking about Avengers because that's the movie he last watched, right? Uh, so the aesthetic is very different. The concerns are also very different, right? And people kind of hated that. The people we hated it, right, when TikTok was really popular. Because the our essential problem with it was there is this cool thing called smartphones and internet, which we are really good with. How come, like a person in a village with a 5K phone, how come he is also able to put a video there? That was what really bothered us. Right? And so now it went away, but again, there are people who are trickling back in doing the same stuff. Only now they have access to Instagram. And all of this is very interesting because Instagram used to compress videos a lot. So that's why TikTok was a better choice for a lot of people because they had an easier time with cheaper phones on TikTok. It also had like songs from their language that they could put up on reels. Uh, so yeah, all very interesting. Also goes back into the same thing that nobody is talking about them because this is not a segment that you can market a stuff to a lot and sell a lot of stuff to. So they are not the millennials worth considering by people who own the narrative, or I'll end up sounding like a conspiracy theorist if I if I go on from
Yeah, hi. So my question is to actually both of you as a millennial, right? At least growing up in the 90s and 2000s, there was a heightened sense of optimism about India and, uh, where we were heading over there. And increasingly, especially over the last decade or so, there seems to be a slow melancholy sort of seeping in that, that it's a chimera and maybe we are heading towards a dystopian sort of reality. Um, just your personal take. You want to cut this by culture, politics, whichever axis you want to take. Where did we lose the plot? What happened? I increasingly just see, despair all around. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there's no answer to this. It's just you've put it out there, and then I think we should all just take a moment of silence to mourn this. I don't know. I think uh, as something that I feel like I'm dealing with, I think there's a lot of grief, right? Like now I think we're in the age of grief. It's not at all an answer in any way, but I think I really feel like there's this, you know, it's a grief for a future that we're not going to have, and we've given this to. Gosh, this is such a depressing thought. But yeah, I think young people have come into a very difficult world, and I know I think everyone has said this over time, but I feel अभी तो बहुत special है. अभी का grief बहुत special है. It's like too bad, too bad. Yeah.
I think your question about why it used to look hopeful and why it doesn't look hopeful anymore is that any marketing, no matter how good, wears off after a point of time, right? You were told a story, you believed in it. Turns out the story wasn't true, right? D.H. Lawrence, I think in Sons and Lovers, he put it as ki, we live in an essentially tragic age. Therefore, it is necessary for us to not call it tragic. I'm paraphrasing. The cataclysm has already happened. So, at the time about which you were talking, the cataclysm, we were in the new coming into existence as far as our life have a choke. The Cold War hadn't been that long ago, right? There were still alternate words that were open to us. And what happened. We didn't go into those alternate words. We chose the one that was the shiniest, right? And turns out to end with a cliche that everything that glitters is not gold. Sometimes it's literal shit. Both are yellow. We bought it. We are left to now deal with it.
We also, I think, inherited a world that was constantly talking about democracy, democratized ways of being. We grew up having the internet, which was the great democratizing
We now have great democratizer again.
AI. And so all these promises of democratization and access and all of this, as Aditya was also putting it early on, these are all the promises that we grew up with. So it's even if the change itself has not been as bad, the promises were so big and so all consuming that it must come before a fall. Feel.
But I don't think this is absolute in terms of key. It's not like it's going to stay this way, right? Like before the French revolutions, people must have felt like that was what's going to be the word from there on out, right? Heads rolled, the word changed, not in a good way, but it changed. And then it changed again a little more, right? Liberal principles were established around the same time, right? Voltaire wrote a bunch of stuff, whatever. I mean, it's interesting stuff, you should read it. But my point is that things that appear absolute in the present moment are not always so. They change. Like what we are doing right now here, right? We are what, 25, 30 people, right? It doesn't matter at all what I say or what Arundhati says. To a larger extent, right? No politician is going to be like कि Bangalore International Center में इन लोगों ने ये बोला था. Now I'll make my next policy based on this, right? The audience really liked it. They laughed at all the right points. But we are still flinging stones at mountains in the hope that it will dislodge a little bit of the mud sticking on. At some point, some stone is going to hit the right place to start an avalanche. Is my hope, because I think I owe you guys a bit of hope.
Yeah.
No, no, no. I'm saying this because that's the point of all this, right? You are not writing about Kashmir files because not enough people know it's a propaganda film. Anybody with two live brain cells in their heads know that it's not something that you need to talk about. But you still talk about because there is probably some little kid in Haridwar right now who is watching that film who believes it, right? And so you are flinging a pebble out there in the hope that he'll find this book in some like second-hand shop or whatever, or maybe he served like a samosa on that particular page, and that will start him out on a journey of doubt. He will question the things that he comes across, and that's the sort of avalanche that I'm talking about. That's the only sort of avalanche that books can bring about. Salman Rushdie said, right? They can't really stop a bullet or a bomb, or even save an eye for that matter. He should have said that as well. I
But also to add to this, because we really should end on some sort of note of hope, and I think it's important because otherwise, what will you? I think that's why I really have decided this year, because I haven't been doing enough of it, that I will meet more young people, like really people, like young children, like their teens, in because from what I've observed and seen, the things they talk about and their concerns and anxieties will shape what this stone flinging at the mountain will look like. And maybe we're not, then in that sense, maybe this room is not, I mean, it's good to deliberate, but there are lots of very cool, uh, very hopeful young people, because they don't also have a choice, and it's also it's a, you have to live in the world, and to live in the world also means that, like, hope has to be illogical, it has to be against all odds, and it's not a rational thing. So where did it go wrong? I don't know, but I'm certain, like, there must be people who are dreaming up something um, a little more sparkly, and not in the current way of sparkly, because sparks in the air, not a good thing right now, but another type of spark, perhaps.
Mary Antoinette is a hopeful image, I think. Heads roll.
Yeah.
Okay, final question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mohan. I just have one question. Like, whenever you're doing this research, right, the problems or the events shape the millennials in India or across the world, right? So something is universal and something is specific to country. Do you, like, during your research, is there any insights you can tell me about the events that shaped the millennials in that particular country? Maybe I think Europe or Asia, that is universal or something unique.
So I was mostly focusing on India. In our case, the way our market opened uh, to all sorts of things, uh, and not just for commodities, but also for culture, for communication via internet. That was the thing that shaped us, right? Millennials, as an upper class or upper class, whatever, millennials are essentially people who walk on potholed roads with their head in American clouds, essentially, right? Which is why we also stumble a lot. But that was the event, and that was the main event. But then again, it's not the only event. A bunch of stuff has happened. One of which is the BJP coming into power, right? That's going to be a generation defining event, because
Yeah.
we are one of the probably the biggest voting groups in the country, and whatever that does in the long term will be on us. We'll have to deal with that uh, and answer to future generations, or be celebrated by them, uh, depending on which side you sit on. uh, I thought that was a laugh, but disappointed. So yeah, there was that also. Again, since I've now anyway gone into political incorrectness, Babri Masjid demolition
Yeah.
was a major event that shaped it up, right? And yeah, whatever followed, that is also something that has shaped how we look at the people around us and our neighbors itself, right? Uh, it decides everything. The places you shop at, your places of worship, how much you worship, whether you think worship is cool or not, right? What you eat for that matter. So
One of the conversations we have in the feminist movement constantly is this sense of between the generations, what have we lost? And one thing that we're quite nostalgic about as millennial feminists is the fact that an older generation of feminists had a T-loss. They had a goal they were working towards. All we're doing right now is saying we don't want this, we don't want this, we don't want this also we don't want, that also we don't want, that also we don't want. What is the thing that we're working towards is not that clear, and therefore it feels like a fragmentation that's very difficult to come out of, and to collectivize around, and to build consciousness around, and so it needs these moments of I believe Gaza is an importantly radicalizing moment, not because yes, it exposes the complete impotence of our of not just ourselves but our world order, um, but it also starts to sow the seeds of saying, hey, then something about the way the world is structured right now is just not working, and as you're saying, therefore that allows for little pebbles of consciousness raising and bringing Freire back into the conversation, and starting to say, hey, what is this world that we're building? How do we build it better? How do we build it completely differently? How do we break the mold? That conversation can only happen when the mold is so broken. So maybe that's the note of hope. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for this engaging discussion. Really enjoyed it.